Well, we are joined now by senior UN analyst at the International Crisis Group from New York, Ashish Pradhan. Thank you so much for coming on the programme. We're just hearing from Frank there saying that a lot of the speeches there at the UN saying that it has a moral obligation to try to resolve this conflict. But what can the UN General Assembly really achieve, if anything?
Well, I think the first thing to keep in mind is, how this issue came to the General Assembly is following several rounds of unsuccessful attempts to adopt, a statement from the Security Council. The U.S. has been insistent over the past week and a half that the Council, should not speak out on this issue, should not weigh in, while its own bilateral efforts were underway. This was something that was not acceptable to other members of the Council, but also, as we saw today, in a number of these moving speeches at the General Assembly, to the wider UN membership. It's good enough, to have the sort of bilateral closed-door outreach that the U.S. is having, but other member states really wanted to see at least an effort to put some concrete actions behind it. But that being said, the room for maneuver at the Council seems limited. I think we might see, if there's a ceasefire that's reached, maybe that will open up some room for the Council to adopt a resolution that would welcome a ceasefire. But until then, things are in a holding pattern. Meanwhile, at the General Assembly, immediate follow-up after today's meeting is also not super clear.
Yeah, I mean, so much talk about the need for an immediate ceasefire to stop the civilian casualties, but also a longer-term solution to this conflict. What, in your opinion, needs to happen for that to occur?
That's really the most difficult question in all of this is, even as we may be inching towards a ceasefire that'll take care of some of the more short-term needs, there have been so many other issues that have come up. For example, the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza. The Secretary General today, announced that he would be launching a humanitarian funding appeal to try to address some of these concerns. So there are newer, shorter-term concerns that'll have to be addressed before we move on to the broader picture, the need to get back to the negotiating table. And there, I mean, that's something where the position of the member states like the U.S., the Egyptians and others, will be critical if we are to move towards anything resembling a lasting peace. That remains further away now than it was a week, 2 weeks ago, unfortunately. So I think the focus now seems to be, let's try to get an immediate stop to the fighting, even if the core issues are unaddressed. Let's try to get humanitarian assistance in to address what's happened in the last week in terms of the dire toll that the bombings and airstrikes have taken, especially in Gaza.
Yeah, I mean, and President Biden says the U.S. is talking to Israel. How much influence does the U.S. really have over Israel when it comes to this conflict?
I think the influence is, of the U.S. is the highest among other outside external actors. The question is how much the U.S. is willing to push and use this leverage. I think the rhetoric from U.S. officials over the past day or two has heightened in terms of them now really wanting a ceasefire to take shape versus in the week or so before that. You saw a lot of the U.S. sort of counseling patience, maybe trying to buy time for its critical ally in the region. Here at the UN, that was the same message that the U.S. officials, were saying was, now is not the time. We're making our efforts, but this is not the time for us to weigh in and unnecessarily contribute to a worsening of tensions, because their reading seemed to be that the more the outside world spoke about this issue, the longer it could sort of prolong the conflict.
Okay.
And so, I think the domestic considerations in the U.S. might also obviously impact their ability and willingness to speak out on this.
Okay, thank you, Ashish Pradhan.